Jim, our next question here from the Cult of Cornette Facebook group was sent in by Justin Marple. When OVW had to stop running the gardens before the Six Flags deal, I remember hearing Jim say Freedom Hall was too expensive. Did they ever look into rent at the Broadbent Arena?
No, because Broadbent Arena is a secondary arena at the Fair and Exposition Center complex in the shadow of Freedom Hall. Freedom Hall was, until they built the Yum Center downtown in Louisville, Freedom Hall was the place to go in Louisville if you were the Rolling Stones, University of Louisville Cardinals basketball team, the big events, right? And Freedom Hall, I'm going to say, opened in the late 50s. And that replaced the Louisville Gardens as the big building in town. And Broadbent Arena was never a destination point for concerts or bands or the Harlem Globetrotters or Holiday on Ice, any of the touring shows. It was primarily used because, especially at the fairgrounds and fair time, livestock shows. Every time I've been in Broadbent Arena, it smells like goddamn cow shit. But it's a big floor, an oblong floor where you can have rodeos and, equestrian events. This is horse country. And it seats probably a little bit more than the Louisville Gardens, but it's a bigger floor, a bigger footprint overall because you're talking about having rodeos and things. And they do the big car shows. They've done them in there. But it was more expensive than the Gardens and not necessarily a great benefit to it. Everybody in town knew where the Louisville Gardens was. Everybody that's ever lived here. And everybody knew where Freedom Hall was. But Broadbent Arena, you had to kind of explain a little bit because it's not the first thing people think of when they think of the Fair and Exposition Center. So it wasn't a familiar building. It's only housed on and off wrestling events. Maybe there's been 7 or 8 in history there. And at the same time, it would still be...
Whose events were there?
WWE ran house shows there once or twice. I think, God damn it, I'm trying to think, was maybe WCW was there. I think we were there one time. No, that was the Commonwealth with Crockett. Crockett never ran it. WCW ran it a couple times. WWE ran a couple of house shows there. You wouldn't want to do TV there. And I think maybe not even that many then. It's just, and you're still renting the building from the fair board, and it's not as cheap as the Gardens. So that wasn't ever something that we wanted to do with OVW because we didn't think we could make money on the thing. Unless someone like Clear Channel bought, the show and we knew what the money coming in was and we knew how to make it work. But otherwise, no. And that building's been there for quite a while. Jarrett never even ran it. When they had to look for another place, a couple of times when the Gardens was being renovated, they went to a local high school rather than, or to the old Columbia gym, I think.
How much of being a promoter is worrying about losing your buildings?
Well, depends on whether you like the one you got or not. Yeah, for most of the guys and the promoters in the territory days, if you had lost one of your key 4 or 5 buildings, there was no way to replace it. If you were Crockett in the Carolinas when it was very successful, there were a couple of, you could go to the biggest buildings in town. But most of the territories, except for Vince in the Northeast, and when they would get hot, they didn't want to go to the biggest building in town, the most expensive. They wanted to go to the secondary building that used to be the big building that was 6,000 or 8,000 seats, that was affordable, and that they could get multiple dates in. And well, it hurt. That was the downfall, really, of the Georgia territory as a really big money territory for the talent. When they could run the City Auditorium 3 nights or 3 weeks of the month and then take the big show to the Omni, they could still run weekly and they could make money. But when the city auditorium closed, they couldn't run a fucking 16,000 seat building every Friday night. And the rent was 4 or 5 times what the city auditorium was, or easily. So they had to cut back on the number of shows, which cuts back on the gross, which cut back on the big payoffs that the guys in the Georgia territory were used to getting for Atlanta. Things like that would have a ripple effect.